All right, let's dive in. Today, we're heading to southern India
Oh, yeah.
between 300 and 1200 CE,
Okay.
a period bursting with, epic poems, folk narratives, classical literature,
Mm,
and we're going to find out how these traditions, they were just stories, right?
right.
They were really powerful tools that helped shape, regional identities and
Mm,
even kept history alive.
yeah.
I am so ready to hear more.
It's such a fascinating period. We
Aren't
always
they?
seem to focus on these big empires, but the South had this vibrant cultural ecosystem, kind of like looking into a kaleidoscope.
Oh, I like that.
Each turn, you see a new facet of their world, right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the time after the Gupta Empire, right?
Yeah.
I remember learning about their golden age.
hmm
But what was going on in the South during that time?
Well, while the Guptas were flourishing in the north,
Like,
the South saw these powerful regional kingdoms emerging,
okay.
like the Chalukyas,
Right.
the Pallavas, and the Cholas. And they weren't just focused on conquering. They
Yeah.
were patrons of the arts,
Wow.
learning. And that's where these incredible
Yeah.
literary and oral traditions come in.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't all about just,
Yeah,
battles and territory. They were
Yeah.
cultivating culture at the same time.
exactly.
Okay. So let's start with the epic poetry.
Okay.
Um, I can already imagine, stories of valiant heroes and epic battles.
Oh, yeah.
But what made them so important in southern India?
Well, epic poetry was like a living history book, right?
Yeah.
Transmitting, values, beliefs, and history across generations.
Mhm.
But, in the South, these epics went beyond entertainment. They were really deeply
Yeah.
intertwined with politics,
Okay.
social life.
Interesting.
Take King Bidispia, for example.
Ooh, a royal figure.
Yes.
Tell me more. What makes him so special?
Well, his story, as it's recounted in the Tibetan Buddhist canon, known as the Bijstanjur,
Mm-hmm.
it's a fascinating example of how rulers
Yeah.
used epic poetry to enhance their authority.
Gotcha.
The commentator Ahita Mitra,
Okay.
he specifically highlights Bidispia's identification with a legendary king,
Okay.
solidifying his lineage, his right to rule.
Uh-huh.
You can imagine using poetry to basically say, hey, I'm descended from greatness,
Yeah.
so I should be king. It's a pretty clever strategy, don't you think?
That's incredible. It's like a PR campaign, but in verse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But did everyone just, accept this version of history?
Well, you see, that's the beauty of studying these traditions.
Okay.
They offer us this glimpse into the power dynamics of the time.
Yeah.
We see how rulers used these stories to present themselves in a certain light
Uh-huh.
and solidify their position, right?
Okay.
But remember, we're also seeing the perspective of the people
Yeah.
who preserved these stories, right? It's a multi-layered narrative.
Oh, wow.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
So it's not just about taking these, epic poems at face value.
It's about understanding the context, the motivations behind them.
Right.
It's like detective work, but with ancient poetry.
Exactly. We have to be critical readers,
Yeah.
even when dealing with these ancient texts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But let's move from these grand narratives of kings and heroes to something a bit more down to earth.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready to hear about the stories of everyday life.
Yeah.
That's where folk narratives come in, right?
Exactly.
These are the tales that regular people shared.
Precisely.
Right.
While kings were using epic poetry to project power,
Okay.
folk narratives gave a voice
Yeah.
to the experiences and beliefs of ordinary people.
Yeah.
These were stories passed down through generations,
Wow.
often shared orally around fires or during community gatherings.
I can almost picture it. Families huddled together listening to these tales being spun.
Yeah.
They must have been like the original social media,
Right.
spreading news, gossip, and wisdom.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
They were incredibly important for maintaining social cohesion
Ah.
and cultural memory.
So what kind of stories did they tell?
Hmm.
Were they just simple tales just for entertainment, or did they have like a deeper meaning?
They certainly were entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
but they were also much more than that.
Okay.
Folk narratives often explored themes of everyday life,
Okay.
relationships with nature, local customs, and moral lessons.
Oh, interesting.
They provided guidance on how to live a good life,
Mm-hmm.
how to navigate social situations,
Yeah.
even how to appease the gods.
So it sounds like they were like a guidebook for life, offering wisdom and insights into the world around them.
Exactly. They were a way to make sense of the world,
Right.
to connect with their ancestors, and to pass on those cultural values to the next generation.
Yeah.
And these stories weren't static, they evolved over time,
Oh, yeah.
adapting to new circumstances
Yeah.
and reflecting the changing realities of these communities.
It's incredible how these seemingly simple stories could play such an important role in shaping people's lives and their understanding of the world. But we've been focusing on oral traditions.
Right.
Was there any place for the written word in southern India during this period?
Absolutely. Alongside these vibrant oral traditions,
Okay.
classical literature, often written in Sanskrit, flourished in the South.
So it wasn't in either situation. They
Yeah.
had this rich blend of both oral and written traditions
Right.
coexisting,
Yeah.
influencing each other.
Exactly.
I'm curious to learn more about this classical literature.
Okay.
What kind of works were they producing?
Well, we see a range of works: intricate poetry, philosophical treatises,
Wow.
plays, and even historical chronicles.
Okay.
These written works often serve different purposes
Okay.
than the epic poems or folk narratives.
Okay, what were some of those purposes?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Epic poetry and folk narratives.
Yeah.
They were largely about preserving,
Right.
shared histories and values.
Yeah.
Classical literature, on the other hand,
Yeah.
was often used to explore these more complex
Eh.
philosophical and religious ideas, record genealogies of the ruling families,
Sure.
and even legitimize rules.
Okay, they're using different tools for different purposes.
Exactly.
Like the oral traditions for, solidifying cultural identity,
Right.
and the written tradition for exploring more complex ideas and documenting history in a more formal way.
You've got it.
Yeah.
It was a dynamic interplay
Okay.
between these different forms of expression.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is how they influenced each other.
Mm-hmm.
We see elements of oral traditions
Yeah.
seeping into written works and vice versa.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
Can you give me a specific example of a classical work from this period
Sure.
that showcases this interplay and the purposes you mentioned?
A great example is the Mushaka Vamshakavya,
Okay.
written by Atula in the 11th century. This work isn't about some grand empire or famous king.
Right.
It chronicles the history of the Mushaka dynasty,
Mm-hmm.
a lesser-known dynasty ruling in the Kerala region.
It's fascinating that they felt the need to document their history,
Yeah.
even though they weren't a major power player.
Right.
Why do you think that was?
Well, it shows that even smaller dynasties understood the power of these written chronicles. They wanted their stories recorded, their lineage validated, their place in history secured.
It sounds like everyone wanted a piece of that literary pie,
Absolutely.
whether it's through epic poems, folk narratives, or these formal historical chronicles.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And this brings us to a crucial point:
Okay.
how these different traditions
Oh.
help to shape distinct regional identities
Okay,
in
yeah.
southern India.
This is where things start to get really interesting.
It is.
Tell me more about how these traditions help to carve out those unique identities for each region.
Imagine southern India as this vibrant tapestry. Okay.
With each region contributing its own unique thread.
Yeah.
These literary and oral traditions, they were like the dyes, right?
Yeah.
That gave each region its own distinct color and texture.
Okay, I'm picturing this amazing tapestry. But how did these stories make each region stand out? Were they telling, completely different types of stories?
Well, each region had its own language,
Right.
its own set of heroes and villains,
Okay.
and even its own way of interpreting historical events.
Huh.
These differences were all reflected in their literary and oral traditions.
Okay.
For example, the development of these regional languages
Yeah.
alongside Sanskrit.
Okay.
That led to the creation of these unique literary forms, further solidifying regional identities.
So it wasn't just the content of the stories, it was the very language they were told in that added to this sense of regional identity. It's like each region had its own cultural fingerprint.
Yes.
A unique way of expressing itself through language and storytelling. Exactly. When you have your own language, your own literature, your own way of telling stories, it creates this powerful sense of belonging.
Right.
And it distinguishes you from other regions.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about, the highbrow stuff,
Yeah.
epic poems, classical literature.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about those folk narratives again.
Sure. Yeah.
Did they also vary from region to region?
Yeah.
What kind of unique insights did they offer?
Folk narratives were often deeply rooted in the local landscape,
Okay.
drawing inspiration from the natural world,
Yeah.
the everyday experiences of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, they definitely varied from region to region.
Right.
For example, a folk tale from a coastal community
Right.
might feature, stories of seafaring adventures,
Yeah.
encounters with mythical sea creatures,
Oh, cool.
while a tale from a mountainous region might focus on spirits of the forest or tales of bravery in the face of harsh natural elements.
It's fascinating how those stories were so intertwined with the environment,
Yeah.
almost like they grew out of the landscape itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet those stories weren't just for entertainment, were they?
You're right.
Yeah.
These folk narratives served a vital social function.
Okay.
They reinforced those cultural values,
Uh-huh.
taught moral lessons,
Okay.
and helped people understand their place within the community
Yeah.
and the natural world.
They were more than just stories. They were like guides for living,
Exactly.
passing down wisdom and knowledge from one generation to the next.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder how many of these stories have survived? How many are still being told today,
Right.
maybe in different forms?
That's a good question.
Do these ancient traditions still have a pulse in modern India?
That's what makes studying this period so exciting.
Okay.
These traditions haven't simply vanished, they've evolved,
Okay.
and they continue to permeate modern Indian society.
Wow. So they're still around.
Their influence can be seen in everything,
Okay.
from literature and art to music, dance, and even political discourse.
Whoa, hold on. Are you saying that politicians are drawing inspiration from these ancient folk tales to connect with voters today?
Absolutely. Politicians often use familiar stories
Okay.
to make their messages more relatable
Right.
and to appeal to a shared cultural heritage.
Mm-hmm.
They might invoke a beloved hero to inspire hope or recount a cautionary tale
Ah.
to warn against certain policies, for example.
Oh, it's interesting.
It's a strategy as old as storytelling itself.
It's like a political strategy with ancient roots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But beyond politics, how else do these ancient tales manifest in modern India?
Think about all the vibrant folk festivals and performances that still take place across the country.
Yeah.
Many of these traditions draw inspiration from these ancient narratives, keeping those stories alive in the hearts and minds of people.
Right.
You see it in traditional dances, puppet shows, religious festivals,
Yeah.
even in the stories grandparents tell their grandchildren.
So it's like those ancient storytellers are still out there, captivating audiences with their timeless tales, just on a different stage.
Exactly.
But those are mostly traditional settings. You mentioned they influence modern art and literature as well.
Absolutely. These ancient stories and themes, they are often reinterpreted and reimagined in modern literature and film,
Okay.
and even in contemporary art.
Interesting.
It's like a continuous dialogue between the past and the present,
Yeah.
with artists drawing inspiration from these ancient wells of creativity.
Uh-huh.
For example, many modern Indian authors weave elements of epic poems and folk tales into their novels,
Oh, yeah.
giving them a unique flavor and depth.
It's like a thread connecting the past to the present,
Yes.
reminding us that we're still grappling with many of the same human experiences and challenges that resonated with those ancient storytellers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of storytelling and its ability to transcend time and cultural boundaries.
Absolutely.
These stories offer us a window into the past,
Yeah.
but they also hold up a mirror to our present. Oh, I see.
Allowing us to reflect on our own values,
Right.
beliefs, and the stories we choose to tell ourselves.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that history isn't just a collection of dates and events.
No.
It's a living, breathing force that shapes who we are and how we understand the world.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And by exploring these ancient stories,
Yeah.
we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of human experience
Absolutely.
and the enduring power of cultural heritage.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this topic,
We have.
but unfortunately we are running out of time for today's deep dive. But before we go, I'd love to hear your final thoughts.
Yeah.
We've uncovered so much about these literary and oral traditions in southern India, between 300 and 1200 CE,
Yeah.
from,
Right.
Epic poems echoing in royal courts to folk tales
Yes.
whispered around village fires.
Yeah.
It just seems like storytelling was so important.
It was.
It really was woven into the fabric of life.
Yeah.
And what's remarkable is how these traditions weren't isolated.
Right.
They intersected and influenced each other, creating this really rich tapestry of cultural expression.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That continues to resonate to this day.
Yeah, and we've explored how these traditions shaped, regional identities, preserved history, and even gave people a framework for understanding the world.
Yeah.
But what's the one key takeaway you want listeners to think about, even after this deep dive ends?
Well, throughout this deep dive, we've seen how stories, whether spoken or written, played a crucial role in shaping the cultural landscape of southern India.
Okay.
They were like architects, right? Yeah. Designing the very foundations of identity and belonging.
They weren't just telling stories.
Oh, no.
They were building communities.
Exactly. But here's the question.
Okay.
I want you to consider.
Okay.
How do you think these traditions continue to influence the stories we tell, the ways we understand ourselves and our communities today?
Wow, that's a powerful question.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that those ancient voices, they're still echoing in our modern world.
They are.
Shaping our perceptions, even influencing how we see ourselves.
It's a reminder that the past isn't truly past.
Yeah.
It's always with us, shaping our present and whispering possibilities for the future.
Right.
Think about the books you read, the movies you watch, the stories you share with your friends and family.
Yeah.
How are they influenced, even subconsciously, by the traditions we've explored today?
It's like a ripple effect, those ancient stories still sending out waves centuries later.
Exactly.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this incredible journey to the world of ancient southern India.
It has been.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure exploring these fascinating traditions with you.
And remember, fellow deep divers.
Yes.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.